Hey everybody, this is Casey from the Kenton County Public Library here in the Local History and Genealogy Department. We are in our archive right now, as you can see, and this is another edition of our Adventures in the Archive series. So for this month of December, we are actually featuring our newspaper collection with a focus on Pearl Harbor. I was trying to do a little bit of research on it with our newspaper collection. And when going through some of our old historical newspapers, I realized there's a lot of resources that we probably haven't talked about for a little bit that people might not remember or might not even be familiar with. So for this episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about some newspaper resources that you could use for, Pearl Harbor research, military research, any kind of research at all. So just to get started, like I mentioned, it is the anniversary this month of Pearl Harbor. And I found we didn't have a ton of stuff over Pearl Harbor. We have a lot of historic newspapers that we keep over, World War One and Two, some stuff about Vietnam. We do have one headline or one newspaper from Pearl Harbor that is kind of interesting to look through. And again, when I was doing some research, I was trying to find different resources we have in the department that we might not be super familiar with, and some that I wasn't familiar with as well, that I was kind of playing around with and getting more familiar with. So some other resources that you might not know about here, again, are physical newspapers, the historic collection here. We like to keep a couple of copies like this issue of the Cincinnati Enquirer and the Kentucky Post, just because it's kind of good, I think, to have these older editions. Even though they're not in great shape, we do try to keep a couple of pertinent headlines in our archive as well, even though most of it's also going to be on our microfilm collection too. So if you're actually looking for a couple of physical editions of newspapers, we do have some of that here in the archive. Again, we also have a lot of newspaper databases online as well. Most people, if you do any kind of research at all here, you're going to be familiar with our newspaper database for the Kentucky Post and Cincinnati Enquirer. Those are available online. We also have a couple of more niche newspaper databases too, including we have access to the Chicago Defender, which was a prominent African-American newspaper. And again, I wasn't really familiar with this database. I haven't had a lot of research requests or my own personal research to use it, but it actually is a really good resource if you're looking for African-American newspapers during that time period, or information about the Midwest and African-American culture during that time period. And I actually was trying to do some background on the actual person that started this, Robert S. Abbott, who started the newspaper around the end of World War One. And the Chicago Defender was actually smuggled into the South because it was such an amazing resource for African Americans in the North to sort of disseminate information about what was going on in free states. So again, that's a resource we don't really seem to get a lot of people in talking about, but if that's something that comes up in your own research, that's a really good resource to use. Again, we also have the Louisville Courier, which is available for the years 1830 and 1922 if you have ancestors or relatives that were in there during that time period, lived in the Louisville area. That's also a resource we don't get a lot of people coming in to use, but we do have that as well online. And again, some other resources that you might not be familiar with or not know about within the department. We have some books as well that kind of can teach you how to use the newspaper databases and resources as well to find more information. There's also Finding and Using African American Newspapers. Again, we have a couple of databases, some newspapers on microfilm, primarily for African Americans. This book is going to tell you a little bit how to get started with that kind of research if that's what you're interested in and it's pertinent to your research needs. We have the Family Tree Historical Newspaper Guide. This gets checked out a lot. It circulates a lot. Again, if you're really getting started with basic genealogy, newspapers are a really good jumping off point because they're easy to search through, but this book is going to give you some tips on how to get started as well. And in our reference department, we also have a lot of books that have collections of abstracts of newspapers in different areas too. We have Pioneer Ohio Newspapers. This is going to give you kind of an overview of newspapers from 1793 to 1810. So we have some books that feature more rural communities, smaller newspapers that you might not think of. So if you have people living in a really, really small area and you can't find anything with some of the bigger newspapers like the Kentucky Post and the Inquirer, maybe look through some of our print collection as well to kind of point you in the right direction of some newspapers that might be in smaller communities or more rural areas in, Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana. And again, I just wanted to mention, of course, our microfilm collections too. We have the Kentucky Post, starting from 1892 to more current years. That's available on our microfilm, and we also have available online as well. Also, the Cincinnati Enquirer online as well. Again, most people are familiar with that, but it's always good to just remind people that that's available as well. So hopefully you had a good Thanksgiving. Maybe you're talking with your family about different relatives or research. And if you want to use some of our newspaper databases or print editions, you're always available here at the department to get you started on that. So I hope this was relevant to you. Hopefully you found some more information that you didn't know about. And we will see you in the new year.